All right. Well, welcome to Tuesday, everyone. And so, be the market expert, and just want to welcome everyone to the first Tuesday after the NAR settlement has gone into full effect, right? And again, it's interesting, and I think this is something that as we're going through that we should all be very like well aware of, at least like some of the information that's being pushed out to our consumers, right? Like we're looking at this thing, we have Inman, okay, there's our publication, we have CNN, we have just a bunch of local news channels, Housing Wire, RAS Media, like NAR and Time Magazine. Like this is the stuff that's being pushed out to your consumer in some kind of capacity, especially on like local media channels. And so I would advise everyone just kind of go in there and seeing what the conversations are looking like. So when you do get I heard this, that we can have a conversation with them to, kind of be able to navigate that information with them. So again, NAR settlement, put it in Google, see what's going on. But let's talk about this one from the 16th, right? And so we're talking 4 days ago, and it is by Logan Motoshami, and his title is, the Fed needs a housing market comeback. Kind of interesting. And I don't know if you guys have been looking at, we just had Mega Camp last week, and Gary Keller kind of went out and said two things. And one of the things was kind of everyone get back to work was, number one. And and he said it way more colorfully than that. And it was a soundbite on Inman. And the other one was like, we are in a housing recession. And it's kind of interesting to think about because when we're talking about recessions, there's no real such thing as like a housing recession and or a car recession, right? Like you can't break those up. Like a recession is a recession is a recession. Yet there is no better word for it. And he said, like, we are in a housing recession. The biggest thing that we have to keep in mind is that when we're talking about the rate increases that we've seen, right? Because rates are pretty high. One of the things we have to keep in mind is that real estate is disproportionately affected by rates going up as well as rates going down. All right. So when rates start going up, what we see is like people pump the brakes and it slows down. And you guys have all lived through this now, right? For the last 2 years, since 2022, we have been in what I guess we could call a housing recession. So inside this housing recession, we've seen way less people raise their hands looking to go buy real estate because the cost, the monthly expense associated with, especially in Colorado, with our price point being around $600,000, it makes it pretty unaffordable. So we're going through, and what Logan is talking about is that the feds probably need to do something because if this continues on, we think that there could be, bigger issues that kind of could happen from this. And when we're looking at this, it's really around the employment of people in the real estate space as far as construction. All right. So multifaceted because if they're not building new homes, that means there's no new homes to go buy. They're not building new homes. That means that there's, less tax dollars. They're not building new homes. That means there's no one to employ in those spaces. Like it's a multifaceted and it impacts a lot of pieces inside of our industry. And it says one key data indicator line flagging a path towards a recession is the loss of residential construction workers. The number of workers who build single family and multifamily homes and do remodeling work tends to decline before every recession as higher interest rates negatively impact the economy. And like we have seen this, like this is nothing new to us. All of us in this on this call have experienced this to this point, right? Like we have absolutely gone through and have seen negative impacts with the high interest rates. This is while the unemployment rate has increased recently, jobless claims have yet to rise to a level that warrants a job loss recession. Now, a recession and a job loss recession are two different things in the grand scheme of things. And we do have a job loss Fed. And what that means is that when what this Fed is looking for is for less people to be employed, less people are employed, That means that people have less money to go spend money. People have less money to go purchase things. And when that's going to look like is that inflation is going to go down, right? Like those are all the different things that they're looking for. Less people spending money, inflation goes down, and the economy starts to, be right again, and the almighty dollar starts to have more value. Like that's really what this thing is around. So it says the housing start activity is at a level we saw during the brief pandemic fueled recession of 2020. Also, this week, this is a big one, right? The Home Depot warned that remodeling jobs are slowing down. So when the Home Depot comes out and says, "Hey, we're not making as much money as we were making," and that they're actually not selling products that are actually going into remodeling, because that's the big thing. Like they're going through, and just so people are aware, like these guys have national, like big national accounts where they're going through and people are buying massive product. And so if Home Depot is going through and saying, "Hey, just want to let everyone know that we didn't hit our goals for the quarter, and the biggest sector that got hit was actually our remodeling space," that tells us something. That means that like people are going through and they're not putting that kind of money in there. So a couple things we need to look at: building permits. It says privately owned housing units authorized by the building permits in July were at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.4, let's call it, which is 4% lower than what they projected, and 7% lower than 2023. All right. So we're talking pretty significant building permits down. They go to housing starts. Privately owned starts in July are at a seasonally adjusted annual of 1.3, which is, let's call it, 7% below the June estimates and 16% less than where they were in July of last year. So when we're looking at this is what we have to keep in mind: building permits. That's when they're going to the city and they're saying, "Hey, we acquired some land and we want to build a home." And then the start is actually when they break ground, right? We see the excavators go through and they start flattening it out. They start digging the holes to put in the plumbing. They're saying both of those are down. And I mean, we're talking double digits like this. I mean, with the housing starts, we're talking 16% less housing starts than we saw last year. Guys, this has huge implications on a lot of different things, right? We talked about that it's going to have the implication on there could be people losing their jobs here in the near future, which does start a chain reaction of different things happening. If we do go into a recession, what they will do is they will start to slash rates. And again, I talked about how we were disproportionately affected by higher interest rates and recessions and inflation, right? Inflation starts going up, they start raising rates, and we get hit the hardest. Like our industry feels it. We are talking about the largest ticket item that most Americans purchase in their lifetime. What that also means is that if we go into a recession and money starts getting really cheap, then people that actually have the ability and the means to come purchase houses, they will come out in droves. And so we are disproportionately affected by these things. Higher interest rates, we get hurt the worst. Lower interest rates, we have a lot more sales than a lot of other people going through. So we just have to keep that in mind. What this also means is this: that means there's going to be less inventory, right? And this is the thing. When we're talking about housing starts and new builds, like it's a very, very small percentage of our total inventory to begin with. Like it's not an astronomical amount. Most of the inventory that we're doing as real estate agents and as in the economy is resale. Like we're retailing homes, historically speaking. But if we look at this thing, we're going to call this, right. Like we're looking, here we are. We are on this far right hand side. So there's starts, units in the thousands. Let's not care about this, but let's look at our visual representation of truly what we're looking at. What we're looking at over here is on this housing starts is we are at these pre-COVID recession levels, right? 2019, here we are, here's 2020. Like we're getting low as far as these starts are going. So they are actually not breaking ground as much as they were. We go through in the permits, they're pulling less permits. So when they're pulling less permits, there's obviously going to be less starts. And we have to keep in mind that on a lot of these projects, especially when we're talking about 5 plus, When we're talking 5+ units, we know those projects take around 2 years. That's a 2-year project. So as we're going through, what we're going to start to see with less permits being pulled and less starts happening is we're going to have a significant decrease in new builds and with these 5+ units and single families. And we look at the single family permits, like here we are. And I told you, like it does represent a very, very small piece of like of our market. Resales take the bigger majority of the homes that are going through that people are actually buying. But here we are, like we are going down. And so there's a lot of indicators that if this keeps going the way that it's going, like we could see a bigger recession affecting more people. Again, for our business, that's not the worst thing, but as an American, like we don't want to see people losing their jobs, right? So a few reasons that they made this economic cycle unique. We've had a large backlog of homes orders in this cycle. And again, they're holding them back. They're not building spec homes, right? I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that we have to keep in mind is that this isn't back in 2007, 2008, where there was just this large influx of new builds that you could actually go through and like you could walk down the street and say, you know, I like this model, let's go and purchase it. Like we've truly shifted, the builders have truly shifted into a model where you pick your land and then you say, hey, this is the home I want on that land. And then you give them money, they start building. So this is the backlog that they're really talking about. It takes an average of 21 months to finish a 5 unit. So I think I just said 2 years. So 21 months. I was 3 months off on this thing. So 21 months. And like as we're looking through, think about the Kmart project, right? Like they've been building on that thing forever. And they finally got the signs up what last month that says like you can start moving in, like, and they're still not finished. So as we're going through, we're like, no, there's a lot of activity. We're starting to see a lot of things go up. Those permits are like 2, 3 years old at that point, right? That's when they started it. The starts are about 2, 3 years old at this point, and they're still building on these things. So as we're looking at it, we have to keep that in mind that, well, it looks like a lot of things are going on. These projects have been in the work for years. It says large publicly traded home builders have gross profit margins of 20%, which means that they can buy down mortgage rates. And we've seen this, right? We've seen with everything that we've been seeing going on, the builders have an ability to go through and they are their own bank. And so their profit margins are going up. And with that being said, they're able to offer these discounts to keep their products moving. And they are not the March of Dimes. They are a for-profit company. And that's why they're not at this spec build model anymore, because that's not how you keep the profits high. How you keep the profits high is you have a scarcity model where there are no homes yet. And if you do want one, here's the lot that you can buy. Here's your lot premium. Give us your money and we'll start building it for you. And that's how they're able to keep the supply tight. They're offering better financing deals, yet they're able to keep their product at a higher price. And that's why we're not going to see them flood the market. New listing data has been historically low levels for the past few years. And yeah, we've seen that, right? There's a lot of people, and I do believe in the lock-in effect. And I do believe in these golden handcuffs, right? When we're going through and we're talking about interest rates being at historic high levels, at least over the last, couple years, 10+ years. And with that being said, we also have the highest home prices. And again, I guess I get that they're going down yet. I mean, this is like the fourth highest year that our home prices have ever been as a nation. And so as we're going through this and we're looking at it, like this is slowing people down. And we're talking about a $3,000 a month mortgage payment. That's a lot of money. That's $36,000. And when we're talking about people at $100,000 a year paycheck or leave or are living paycheck to paycheck, like 36K, like this is what is slowing things down. And we're going to see less people put their home on the market because they don't want to go through and get a higher interest rate. And there are many new homes that have been permitted, but they have not started. Again, they're not starting because they're not going to flood the market. They will not flood the market. This is what happened to them back in 2000. They did flood the market. There was an influx of home. Now, here's where there is probably a bigger influx. If you go down to Texas or Florida right now, there was a housing boom, and they probably are in a more of a bubble than really anybody else at this point, just because there are so many people moving in droves to these two areas that at the time these builders were building and they were building and they were building, and now they got a little too much inventory. So as we're going through, I think the rest of the nation is definitely going to slow down. So it says things have changed as of late. Housing construction data is at recession-like levels. Single family permits are still falling and remodeling activity is slowing down. As more units are completed and unless more starts occur, we are getting closer to not having such high employment. So we're going to see employment go down. People will lose their jobs. Recessionary factors are going to take place. As we're going through, the Fed has indicated they are going to drop rates. And again, while with recessions and rate drops, that does help our industry. It helps our industry a lot. Again, we're disproportionately affected with higher rates and lower rates. Like with higher rates, we get hurt the worst. Lower rates, we get helped the most. And as we're going through this, but we do have to keep in mind that we don't want to see people lose their jobs. So hopefully what the Fed is looking at, and we can all like this should be in everyone's, thoughts, is that we want the Fed to come through, lower some rates again, and keep going through and doing this. And yes, it's going to weaken the dollar, yet we will protect more Americans through this. This came out the other day, and I kind of put it up on Coffee Talk a little bit. And this is truly the Denver market, right? And so we're looking at this as, well, hey, we're going towards a buyer's market. And here's the thing. I don't think this is 100% accurate. Yes, we are going towards a buyer's market, but we're not in a buyer's market. We're not even in a balanced market yet. In the grand scheme of things, we are not in a balanced market, so we can't be in a buyer's market. We're still in a seller's market. There are pockets. There are absolutely pockets where homes are sitting a little bit longer. And not only are there pockets like as far as neighborhood goes, but there's also price points, right? There's definitely things that are happening. It says a loss of population coupled with elevated mortgage rates have softened demand. Guys, we are one of the most expensive states in the United States to live, like one of the top most expensive states in the United States to live. And so as we're going through and we keep talking about interest rates, we are also disproportionate. While our industry is disproportionately affected by interest rates, Colorado is really affected by interest rates. And when we're talking about home prices going up, our taxes have gone up significantly. Our insurance has gone up significantly. There's a lot of people that cannot afford to live in Colorado. Like we're talking like multi-generational housing. And when someone dies, and we're going through and there's taxes and everything else that's going on, like the family's pretty much having to move out. And I don't mean like the breadwinner of the family's dying. I mean like a family member that may have been going through and was the house owner, and then the multi-generational, and then everything just gets so expensive that people are actually just having to sell the house and move to another state. And so we're going through and we're looking at this, and here's the biggest one. So Denver median price versus the inventory. We can see this inventory is that green level and median price is down here. So we're actually getting more inventory on the market, and our price point is going down. Like we can see this inventory is popping up, and we can see that the price point is going down. Now, this isn't new builds for us. These are resales, and we're seeing that people are moving, and there's different things happening. Like I just got off the phone with someone that is relocating to Texas, right? We're seeing people that are getting out of the state for one reason or another. We're going in and it has just our action report. So we're going through here. It says inventory in the city has also risen sharply, giving buyers more options and more leverage in negotiations. In addition, a sizable amount of inventory is new construction. And again, it's a sizable amount. And in the grand scheme of things, we're really talking, this is a minor, minor, minor chunk of what happens when we're talking about real estate. But again, it's pointing to why is it doing so well? Is because they're their own bank. They are not restricted by what the Fed is doing. Like they have funds and they get to do their own financing with people that come to them. And so we can see this that we're kind of going down a little bit further as we're going in through these years. Then we have Denver percent price decrease versus price increase. Now this is interesting because when I look at this, when I talk about price increases, I really think of new builds, phase one, phase two, stage one, stage two, right? And so like this number, it is what it is. But here we go when we're talking about the price decreases. Yeah, they're going up. we were to look at Altus data, which we will for Arvada specifically, we're going to see that we're actually pretty high. Historically speaking, the nation sees 1/3 of all homes take a price cut every year. In Colorado, we're a little bit higher. In Arvada, we're really high. We're closer to like 50%, I think. So 50% of all homes in Arvada are taking a price cut. And I think that, as a fiduciary, especially with everything going on, right? Commission lawsuits, welcome to Tuesday. And we need to be able to make sure that as we're sitting at the dining room table, that we are that real estate economist of choice, that we're actually going through and we're making sure that they're not making decisions based off of Zillow from what their neighbor did 2 years ago. Right? We got different interest rates. We got a different economy. It's a different time of year. Like we got all these different things that are happening. And so the competition isn't Zillow 2 years ago, what the neighbor did. The competition to get your home price accurately so you get the most amount of money that we can in this current environment and the least amount of time is that we need to look about around what's happening in the current neighborhood so that we can price accordingly. So kind of interesting. I think it's a little misleading to say sharp turn towards, but yet we got to go through a balanced market first. And a lot of this is driven by interest or by time on market. And we're not there yet. I mean, we got to be 3 to 6 months. And while, yes, there's some price points and there's pockets that are going up there, we're still seeing homes that are priced right, that are in an area that makes sense for buyers, that they're going in the first weekend still. They're going in the first week. So I still think we have a ways to go for Colorado to turn into a buyer's market. I don't necessarily agree that we're going to get there. I do think, yes, that there is going to be indicators that look like we're in a buyer's market. And what I mean by that is, yes, we're seeing concessions. We're seeing sellers willing to play ball. We're not back in 2020. Like, I think that's where we're basing a lot of this off of 2020. There's multiple offer situations. We were going tens, 20s, 30s, $100,000 over asking price. We were waiving contingencies. Like all these different things were happening. And none of that's really happening anymore. Yeah, there's multiple offer situations, like two or three maybe. We're not going hundreds of $1,000s over on asking, and we're seeing concessions. And I think that's the biggest thing. And yet the concessions it's a win-win because I think we have to keep this in mind. That with the concession, if the seller's offering a concession, typically on the buy side, they're probably getting a concession at the same time. So they're just trading money to make these things happen. They're giving it on the sell side because they have equity in their home to the buyer. And then when they go to buy a house, the seller is giving them a concession because they have equity in the home. So they're just trading this money to make these interest rates more affordable for people on their monthly payments to make deals work. But if we were looking at rear view facing data, and again, we're going to go back to Logan from Friday. And again, it's like lower mortgage rates are slowing down inventory growth, right? So what we're saying is, homes are coming off the market a little bit quicker, a little vast difference from Denver housing market takes sharp turn towards lower rates are slowing down inventory growth because more people are buying the houses now, right? Like, okay, cool. So what is this? So we are seeing lower interest rates, which is good. And what's cool about this is just naturally occurring. The Fed has not stepped in yet. The Fed has done nothing to make this happen, and rates are going down. So, but if we're looking at inventory, we can actually see that weekly inventory change from August 9th to the 15th. Again, rear view facing data, we went from 692 to 698. So not a huge jump. But if we were to look at this data versus this time last year, we're almost 200,000 homes more. We are 200,000 homes more. So that's a good sign. We're going through, if we're looking at the all-time bottom back in 2022, that was 240. So we're nowhere near that, which is super exciting. Our peak in 2024 is 698. So we're there. And for some context, active listings in 2015 were 1.2 million homes. Like that's what we're looking for. We're looking for like the 1.2, the 1.3, something giant. We're looking for these larger active listings. And we have to keep in mind, we have more people in the United States. We have to think about the cycle of life, right? Like they date, they get married, they have kids, the kids grow up, they date, they get married, they have kids. Like our population keeps growing in the United States. And then also we have to keep in mind is this, like our immigration policy, like we're not Japan. Japan's locked down. Like Japan's immigration policy is super tight and it's pretty much a negative. Like if you were to look at like what all the economists are looking at, Japan's going to be in a world of hurt in the next like 10, 20 years because they don't have a population that's growing to be able to take on the jobs and the tasks that are needed to be done to keep civilization going. So as we're going through and we're looking at this, like our population keeps growing and growing, and every year keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we need more housing. So for us to have 1.2 million homes in 2015 with way less of a population, it's kind of concerning. But what's cool about this is if we were to look here, 2024, like we're inching up. Everything that we're looking at, we want to go pre-pandemic levels. We want to be above 2020 levels. That's considered a more normal market pre-pandemic. So we're getting there. Like we're climbing, like a little, looks like a flat line, like a little bit. Yet this is good. More inventory, more choices. A balanced market is not the worst thing in the world that we could be in. New listing data is we're just going to look at this, but let's go to the visual representation. And we're starting to get a little bit higher. So new listings, we want to see this. We want to see people, and we will. With interest rates continuing to drop, and there's a lot of smart people betting next month that the Fed is going to jump in and do a bigger drop, that this number will start going up. More people will get more comfortable. The people that have been waiting on the sidelines, the people that are like, you know what, it's time. Family's getting bigger. We need a bigger house. Family's getting smaller. Kids are going off to college, whatever that looks like. Kids are getting married and they're going off. Like we need to change the home sizes. With interest rates going down, this will help with that. That when we're talking about mortgage rates and this lock in effect, I think it's very real. And I think one of the biggest things is while people are always going to probably need bigger homes, if interest rates stay high, what the bigger fear would be is this: people stay in place, right? We have these empty nesters staying in place and they don't ever sell their home. Then what happens to the families that are getting bigger? Well, they're locked in to wherever they are, and we're not changing house demographics when they need to be changed because the family's either growing and or it's shrinking or it's growing and it's going back and forth, and we need properties to change hands. Well, if interest rates stayed inflated and at all-time highs, people aren't trading homes anymore, and we're going to see a lot of people that are getting closed off that need a bigger home. They can't afford it because nothing's coming on the market. So home prices keep going up as well on those bigger houses. And then we see people that age in place and stay in their 3,000 square foot home because it doesn't make any sense for them to go to a lower house, especially if there's any kind of payments that are involved. So that's kind of like this catch 22 that we're in, especially with interest rates. Price cut percentages. Historically speaking, we know that 1/3 of all homes take a price cut. The United States right now is sitting at 39%. 39% of all homes in the United States have taken a price cut. And if we were to look at this thing, like here we are, 2024, like we finally found a graph where we are like on top. We're seeing a lot of price cuts happening again, and it's because we're basing a lot of things off of information from Zillow and how people are feeling when they're going to go sell their house. Or they could be in a position. I think that if we were to think about people that bought a home in 2022, 2023, they vary, especially 2022, maybe not 2023, like they might be underwater, or they might be very close to that cusp of being underwater, upside down, if you will. And if they go to sell their house and they're paying all these different fees, like they could be in a place where they're going to lose money. And so that's also what we could be seeing, is that like some kind of a life event has happened to where these people actually need to sell their home, and they started at a price because that's what protected them. They're like, I have this price for me just to break even. I'm okay with breaking even, but I don't want to lose money. And then now we're seeing them actually have to come down because again, life event is forcing them to sell, and they've come to grasp with that like some money might be um, being lost at this point. Pending home sales going up. Like this is exciting. Like we want to see home sales going up. And again, interest rates are coming down. Like we should be able to see some things. And we do know that we're going into our slow time. We do live in a industry where we do have a slow time and an on season. And we're getting into this season right now where people are starting to slow down more and more and more. And like that's what we're heading into. Yet, I think with interest rates, we're going to see people more driven by interest rates versus seasonality going forward a little bit. So this number could start to pick up. It'll be very interesting to watch over the next couple months, especially in this presidential year, that we're going through. It's going to be very interesting to see kind of what happens with this data right here. Like, does this line start to creep up at any point, and do we kind of break the seasonality that we've typically seen in historic years? Purchase application data, it did fall, right? So it went down. And what's interesting is this purchase application data, like, we're going through, there's people refinancing, there are people buying houses, like there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. And so again, we're so low, we're so in the basement at this point that anything really just kind of moves this needle. Like, if there's a little bit of a spike, and so we'll kind of see that. We'll kind of see pockets of like spikes going up and down, especially with different things that are happening. Interest rates go down, the right homes come on the market, people are start to buy, and they'll kind of hold off and move forward from there. So this is going to be kind of interesting. We're not going to talk about the 10-year yield. We're not going to talk about the treasury. We're not going to talk about the spread. The spread is interesting though. Like, if we were to talk about it at a very, very 20,000 foot view, as long as when the mortgage spreads are getting closer and closer and getting more proportional, like that's the sign of a healthy market. Like, that's kind of what we want to see. We're not going to live in this, but Logan does talk about the Silicon Valley Bank collapsing, the crisis, if you will, right? Where the bank didn't have the money to be paying out everyone, where they're like, I want my money. And the bank's like, we don't have it. We spent it. And they're like, well, how come I can't get it? And then the Fed or the federal government had to jump in and had to bail out the banks, at least the Silicon Valley Bank. That's what actually started like this whole bad thing going on. So like, if we were to look about everything that happened, it's all around the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, that where they went down. So Al definitely definitely controls what happens. Depending on what he says, we're going to see either rates go up or rates go down, even if he doesn't say that he's going to cut or raise or hold, right? If he indicates one way or the other, we're going to see a spike. It'll either go up or go down. But again, a lot of people think September. September is the month. And so again, we just need to be making sure that we're having conversations with our clients. We need to be that real estate economist of choice. We're going through, we got to figure out what their real estate goals are. And once we understand what is happening in their world, and we know what the dollar amount is, where they're comfortable buying, selling, whatever, we know things are about to start happening and we need to start getting back into relationship. But here we go again. Here's 1 month's data, right? We're talking July 2024 to August 19th, 2024. I don't know why we can't ever get like super updated data. If we really wanted to look at it, I could tell you what today is. Let's go. Looking off of it, today's interest rates, it's gone up a little bit. So we've gone up 30-year conformings at 669. If we're talking about FHA, we're at 641. And so everything's gone up a little bit. But if we were to look at it just on this grand 1 month time, guys, rates are going down and the Fed has not intervened yet. The Fed has not dropped rates, and we are naturally declining. This is good stuff. Like, we want this. We need this in our industry. Again, disproportionately affected by what rates are doing. So again, if the Fed comes in, they go, 25 basis points, 50 basis points, whatever that looks like, and they hit us with a price cut or a rate cut, what are our buyers doing? Who are our buyers on the fence that are just waiting for this? Like, they are there, guys. Like, how many conversations are you guys having where people are like, I'm just waiting for this? Well, this is right around the corner. Like, it is. And so we just need to be making sure that we're having conversations, we're positioning ourselves as that real estate economist of choice, having the conversations so that they know that we're on top of things, and that our lenders, like, what products are our lenders offering right now? So if we see a rate cut of 25, 50 basis points, and our lenders are doing some kind of buy down, plus they have some refinance that they're offering within a year, does that make sense? Like, can we be pushing out that information and making sure that our buyers understand it, that we actually have a product that they can't really get hurt in, right? Like, and we can't guarantee that they're not going to get hurt, but in the grand scheme of things, interest rates go down. Our uh, lender has some kind of product where they're able to make the interest rates even cheaper. And they're saying, and here's the thing, in 1 year's time, whatever happens with rates, if you want to lock in at the new rate, we're gonna let you do it. Like, that sounds like a good deal, and we're seeing them go down. This might be the opportunity. But here's even a more fun look at this thing. Here's a year. Here's 1 year's worth of time. And so, like, we're looking at this. This is September 2023. We're seeing these peaks, and we're getting down there again. Like, we're getting less and less expensive. We'll never hit 3% again. Gift from God. Like, that's not something that we're going to see in our lifetimes. Yet 4.5, somewhere 5.5, somewhere in that range is probably where we're going to live for probably a very, very long time. We just need to figure out what our clients are comfortable with. And then, like I said, we're going to look at some Altos data from Arvada, and you can kind of see what we're looking like in Arvada as of today. And so our median list price, $752,000, and our new median list price for new listings, 737. So they're coming down a little bit again, and right, we can see this when we're talking about days on market. So our average days on market, 64 days. And so this is taking into effect the overpriced listings and the homes that, sell in a couple minutes. Really not the couple of minutes, because it doesn't have enough time to, extrapolate that data, but homes that sit on the market for a day or two. It's taking all that, it's dividing it up, 64 days. Median days, it's removing all the outliers, and it's just figuring out the middle days, so 42. So when we're talking about 752,000 versus 737,000, the conversation that we need to be having with our sellers when we're trying to figure out the price is, do you want to sit on the market for 42 days, or do you want to sit on the market for 2 months? Because if we overprice the home, likelihood of the home sitting and us taking a price cut, because price cuts in Colorado, in Arvada specifically, 60%. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what are your motivations for selling? When do you need to be there? If you're not able to sell your home by that time, what does that do to you and your family? What's more important? Is it days on market, or is it the price? Both. Awesome. So with that being said, as we're going through, if I can get you the most amount of money that the market is demanding in the least amount of time for the least amount of headache to you, does it make sense for us to list your price at here and see what the market demands, right? We need to be that economist. We need to have those uncomfortable conversations, because here's the thing. The data is showing it to us. We are literally talking 2 months versus 42 days. I know it's not a huge difference, but we're talking 3 weeks. 3 weeks difference is going to be the time on market difference between pricing the home right and overpricing it. And 60% of all homes in Arvada are taking a price cut at this point. These are the conversations. This is the data that we need to be sitting down with our clients to be having these conversations with, to show them what is the penalty, if you will, for overpricing a home. And when we figure out what their motivations are, as we're doing these needs analysis with them, they're not telling us no at this point. They're telling themselves no, right? Like, if we're going through, we're figuring out, why did you call me here today? Why am I sitting at the dining room table with you? What's important about selling the house to you? What does that do for your quality of life? And then we're going through and we're figuring out all that stuff. Then we're saying, like, hey, what if you can't sell your house? What does that do for your quality of life then? What does that do to your emotional state? Like, we're figuring out. And then so we put them in this place where, you know what, it's not Zillow for 2 years ago where you're going to make all this money that you think that you're going to make. Like, we're in a different environment. And we're going through and we're having these conversations. Then they're not telling the real estate agent, they're telling themselves no, right? They're like, oh my God, like, then we wouldn't be able to live closer to the grandkids, which would super suck. That means that we're having to constantly fly out there, or we're getting less time with them. We're not able to, go to that new job that we've been hired to do. One of us would have to go fly out there, and the other one would have to stay here until the home sells. Like, as we're going through and figuring out those motivations, they're having to tell themselves that it's okay to live in pain, or to be like, you know what, I super appreciate you bringing that information. Like, all these are great points, and the data isn't going to lie. So let's put the home in an appropriate price point so that we can sell for top dollar that the market is commanding right now, as well as for a lesser time than what the homes are sitting for. And no one wants to go through a price decrease. No one wants to, right? We're stigmatizing properties at that point, and the homes will just sit even longer. Price increases, to me, this number doesn't excite me. Again, this is 2%. This 2% to me represents stage 2, stage 3 of these new builds. And again, we're going to see less new builds. They are a for-profit company. They are not going to flood the market. They want as much money as possible. 8% relisted. We're going to see this, right? With interest rates being as elevated as they are, we're going to see people go buy a house and they're saying, you know what? If we're not going to be able to come to terms on inspection items and on these other things, like I don't think this is the home for me. 8% of homes are being relisted. Inventory 268 and median rent price $2,900. If we would go to their market action report, we still are a seller's market, yet we aren't as in a great of a seller's market as we were last month. And again, we see that. We're seeing this. We're going into more seasonality and kids are going back to school at this point. So we could see some things change. And again, I think a lot of this is going to be interest rate driven like it has been for the last 2 years. Yet we're finally seeing it go back down. And there are talks, real talks about interest rates being cut. And we should be shouting it from the rooftop and having conversations with our clients to see at what price point does it make sense for their monthly purchase power to go out and buy a house.